Hey guys, it's Nova, and admittedly in this video we're doing something a little bit different. Instead of doing a video topic or anything like that, we're actually going to talk a little bit about the design of a character and talking about, well, the art in the video. That's going to be the main thing. So there's not really going to be a whole segment on, oh, the art in the background is, like I would usually do. I want to start doing more videos like this. I think it would be really interesting, especially with characters for Trace. I think it would just be something that's really neat and really cool to do, especially whenever it comes to everybody's transformed states, which is what essentially this one is. Now, the character in this one is Lyndon, and honestly, if I had thought before finishing the art that I was going to do this kind of structure for the video, I probably would have recorded the sketching process, but I didn't. And here we are. I will try and do that differently going forward. Now, I do want to touch on the fact that rather than doing a concept piece, I did like a finished, full chibi kind of illustration in this, which going forward will not be what I'm doing when I do these, especially for Trace, but I will be doing some for my other, like, series ideas and story ideas, my story concepts, because I think this would be a neat way to sort of expand on them, help me kind of work through things and build through them. Because I think these are really fun and interesting. I love whenever I see other people do it, like ABD Illustrates his little Concept Corner series. I love that. But also, like with Jinja Ninja and their, I honestly love June's Prism stuff with their Magical Girl stuff. And I really, really like that, and that has sort of inspired me, and I hope that other people seeing little, snippets of me developing characters and developing story beats and plot stuff and concepts for my stuff will maybe inspire other people, because I think it's really fun to see, so hopefully you guys will enjoy seeing it too. So getting into the design of this, I know that I did seeing the sketch of the character, then flip it, and then I, of course, ended up zooming in and started in on the detailing of the inking, because that's what I like to start with, so you guys get to hear a little bit more about my process as well in regard to the way I line things and the way I color. But talking about the actual character himself, this is Lyndon. That is his regular name. I have not figured out the naming conventions really for the transformed states as of yet, so that'll come eventually, just not yet. But this is Lyndon, that's his regular name. All of the characters actually for Trace, their names are based loosely around things to do with plants and types of plants and different plants, hazel, hawthorn, willow. You get trees in there, but you've also got linden, clover, sorrel, and poppy. I thought that was really neat. It was a neat little unification thing, and I really liked that. But when it comes to transformed states, there's not really inspiration taken from plants. Especially with Lyndon. If you couldn't guess, his primary theming is unicorn. Because everyone's transformed state is going to be off of a mythical creature either existing or that I have made up. Because I have my own little fantasy stuff, and the Trace prequel stuff goes into more of the fantasy things. That would be why Neela looks the way she does. That would be like why Kier looks the way he does. He is a dark elf. And it's just a lot more interesting with all of that. Kier's lover, Arlo, is what I refer to as a water elemental. Not like an elemental spirit, that's different. But because there's these different fantasy elements, I thought it would be really interesting for essentially the different creatures that are, the themes for everyone's transformed outfits essentially correspond to what was the guardian of that particular magical element. because I couldn't resist. I had to go with magical elements. I am a sucker for magical elements. And Lyndon's is light, and I thought it would be very interesting to have unicorn for light, because that seemed appropriate, that seemed neat. And that's actually where we get into some of the actual design bits. Of course, he's got the little headpiece with the horn. That's not too surprising, really, honestly. I thought that one was a given. That was an easy kind of shot for that. But some of the more interesting details that I really liked was, for classic unicorns, not just your basic horse with a horn, but your more classical unicorns, one thing that you've got is cloven hooves. So the ends of his gloves, his little arm, his long gloves, that's what it is, long gloves, have a different coloring, more of a darker blue coloring. And that's supposed to indicate the hooves, as well as on his boots. There's actually a stylization there and a little design detail that indicates cloven hooves. And I really liked that. I thought that would be just a neat little detail. But another thing that I really like is like the longer hair or fur around the ankle of unicorns. They usually have the longer hair. I know there's a particular name for it. Is it fetlocks? Maybe? I don't know. I don't remember. But I liked that design a lot. So we've got a bit more of a flowy fabric around the top of the boot, around the ankle, as well as around the wrist. I thought that was just a neat little detail and kind of cool to include another allusion to unicorns themselves, especially because the way I would design unicorns for my fantasy stuff, they are a bit more classical rather than just a horse and put a horn on its head. And that led me to, when I was in the sketching phase, a lot of this was a bit harder to figure out. And another thing that was a lot more difficult for me to put together as to how I wanted to represent it was actually the unicorn's tail. I didn't want to actually have anything like coming off of his belt or off of his waist. I thought that was a little bit too on the nose. So initially the wrap around his shoulders and the little cape that becomes a little asymmetrical short cape later, initially it was going to be a lot longer and then kind of caught at the end to kind of like a puff of fabric after, like tied off, and then like you have the excess fabric is like a little bunch afterwards. Because classic unicorn tails is not just your standard horse tail, it's like the more long skinny tail with the hair at the end of it, rather than, just the typical all hair horse tail. And I've always thought that little design was neat. I thought that was nice. It helps to differentiate it from just horses and just like a weird horse with a horn. So I've always thought that was interesting, but trying to figure out how I wanted to represent that on his character design was really difficult, because in the sketching phase, and this is why I want to include that more later on, I really struggled with it. Initially, I did do something off of his waist, like part of his belt, or like a little capelet, little hip cape like you see on things, because I like that stylistically. I think it looks cool, but it wasn't working for what I needed it to here. And then I tried the longer cape, like his actual cape being longer and then caught at the end. And then it dawned on me, and the hilarious thing was why it dawned on me the way it did. But what popped in my head, genuinely, was Ray from Beyblade. Because he's got that wrap with his hair that goes down, then it has like the tuft of hair at the end. And I was just like, oh my gosh. When they transform, I'm having their hair change in at least subtle ways anyway. Mostly color, some length. But I will be doing changes to the hair anyway when they transform from their civilian designs. Why don't I just add that? Something like that. So we ended up actually with a bit of a wrap with his hair being longer, but it's wrapped, and then there's the little tuft of hair, the little puff at the end that shows the ends of it. And that just finally, whenever I got that design work, whenever I got that part of the design into it, it finally looked right in regard to the sketch. And that was, thank goodness, because I was so frustrated with trying to figure out how to make that design work so that the horn wasn't the only part that actually indicated, oh hey, he's themed around a unicorn. But even once I got the actual design figured up in regard to like the lines and how that looked, coloring was a whole other nightmare. You'll probably see with a lot of the colors that I went through a few different things. He has a couple little markings on his face. Real life, you know, his civilian design, not real life, but civilian design, he's got a couple little beauty marks, one on his cheek, one on his nose. For his transformed state, I gave him one to balance out the one near his eye, you know, on his cheek. I gave him one on each side, and then the one on the nose I kind of expanded to be more of a little mark there, kind of an indication towards like horse markings, because I thought that was neat and I enjoy the different little colors. Now trying to figure out what color to make that, whether I wanted it like a darker brown or I wanted it to make it white. I wasn't sure. I eventually went with like a soft brown, and I thought that worked really well. But the hair color drove me up the wall, because another thing that I wanted to take into account, especially for colors, along with the theming from the animal, is the theming from the element. I want some kind of indicator there of light, because again, unicorn and light, those are the two that fit together, and I think it's really neat. I think it's cool. But unicorns, I like the more silvery kind of color for them. But I wanted light in there somewhere, so at first I thought, well, I'll just make his hair like a really, really pale yellow, like a really blonde. But then I was like, I'm not sure I like that. So I had to go back, and I had to play with the colors a bit more. I had to get my fiance's help, because no matter how much I pay attention to color theory and try to learn about color theory, color is just not the part that I really shine in. So I usually end up asking my fiance for help. I look at her and I go, can you look at this? I have no idea what I'm doing on the colors, help. So she looked at it and she really liked the kind of silvery color better, and I did too. And I had a few flat colors down. After a bit, once I figured out the base hair color, I did make a layer that was more the silvery and a layer that was the blonde. I figured I'd play with it back and forth. I ended up sticking with the silvery, which I'm really glad that I did. But as I put down the flat colors, I ran into another issue. First off, how do I do these colors where it has like more of a unicorn motif and seems more unicorny, but isn't just white or just like a really pale blue? And I also, again, for light, I wanted some yellow, some gold specifically in there somewhere. And initially his eyes were almost blue too. As you'll see with the coloring, his eyes almost ended up blue too. And I eventually settled on, with the flat colors, the armor on the chest, because I do like some pseudo armor detailing, especially where it's supposed to look kind of fantasy-ish, even for the transformed states. I liked the idea of a gold breastplate and some gold gilding like around the headpiece with the horn. But without the actual shading and color on it, oh, it looked so out of place. It looked much better once I had the shading on it and it actually looked more like gold than just yellow. But it was so out of place, and I was having a little bit of a crisis with it on there for a bit. It was absolutely just baffling, like, how do I even do this? How do I fix this? And so I kind of gritted my teeth and just kept through it, and I was like, maybe it'll come together in the end. If not, I can change the colors, I can fix the colors. And I just kind of gritted my teeth and went through it with the little indicators. I mean, it might be fetlocks, I don't know. The little indicators for the longer hair. I did, for the little flowy fabric, I did a lighter blue and more of a darker blue for like the hoof-inspired detailing and some of the details on, I think, the cuff of the shorts. And also for his lyre, part of it is a darker blue with some gold on it. I'm still learning how to properly draw instruments. It's a learning process. All of it's a learning process. I'll get there eventually, especially since if I do trace as a comic, I'm going to have to draw this stuff a lot. The more I draw it, the more I'll learn how to. But it was such a struggle trying to figure things out, and then on a whim, because I figured I needed to figure out what color, I also wanted to do the gem on his cape. And that was another problem, because what color can I use for light? I don't want to just use yellow. If I just use yellow, it's going to blend in with the gold too much, unless I really, really, really painstakingly detail it. But then it's also not pulling it together properly with everything else. And then, well, maybe I could do white, kind of like an opal thing. And all of this was brainstorming. A lot of this didn't end up actually on the thing, although I did consider it. And through all this, I think this was when his eyes were still blue. His eyes were still blue at this point. And then something clicked, and I think it was partially because I had been playing Stardew earlier in the day. Stardew Valley. I loved that game, especially because it helped me with this. It finally hit me that what if I, went with kind of a topazy color? What if I went with kind of more of a little bit more of a topaz type color, like that yellowy, amberish kind of color? And what if I did that with his eyes too, to kind of tie everything together? And when I switched that, when I changed his eyes to that gold color, and I really went in and detailed it, and I went in and I detailed the gem also, everything started falling into place. As I finally started to just finish with coloring and detailing everything, it all started thankfully falling into place, because the design phase and figuring out what I was doing, it essentially just slammed me into the wall of everything that I was worried about with trying to design a magical character. Just, oh no, how do I do this without it becoming too much, and without the colors being too much, and with everything being manageable? How do I manage to do that all together without it being a nightmare later? And thank goodness things suddenly started falling into place, because the reason I hadn't drawn anyone's transformed states before now was genuinely because I've been intimidated. I have been so intimidated with designing my own magical style outfits and transformations. It's been such a worry for me, and it has kept me back and held me back, and hopefully this will help me so much going forward, because I did one, and admittedly none of the designs for Trace that I've posted so far may end up being the final things. Things may get reworked, things may get redrawn, just because it still is in early concepting, genuinely. But this was just such a breakthrough for me on that mental block, and I'm so glad that I drew this. Now, the hilarious thing is, I've drawn Lyndon transformed before I've drawn him normal, so that's going to be fun. I still get to design his civilian design, which won't look too much different, but it will look different. At least a bit. So the background also gave me some fits. The backgrounds on things like this always give me fits. I finally went with just the symmetrical ruler tool is a godsend in Clip Studio Paint. Genuinely it is. It is a godsend. It helped me create that sun motif and get everything detailed on it. Now, you will see in the coloring phase, I struggled with making that look all shiny and nice, especially because at one point it looked like a really discolored orange on the center of the sun, and I'm just like, this is not working. Am I going to have to scrap this whole background? It looked like a discolored orange, and it was just so frustrating because what do I do? How do I fix this? And I finally just turned off the symmetrical ruler and shaded the center part of the sun like that, and it looked much better, thank God. But I had a lot of fun adding like the little sparklies and making the background itself also look very magical and interesting. And that's about it for this little design. Now, from now on going forward with these, I am going to include the sketching process, and it'll be a bit longer of a video probably as I do them, because I'm going to try and do a couple of characters at a time. and maybe show how I go about actually designing the characters themselves. And I think that would be really fun. I want to start doing that. But let me know what you guys think of this kind of video. Do you want me to do more of this? Do you think it'd be interesting, especially if in doing so, I can talk more about Trace as a story and a story concept? But definitely let me know what you guys think. I really want to hear your input, and I hope you guys like this. If you did, please subscribe. If you're not, I'm getting really close to 1,000, and that still makes me feel like I want to cry, because I never thought this would happen. I look at things and I'm just like, oh my god, how did this happen? And it makes me happy. But please also, if you enjoyed this video a lot, give it a like. That definitely helps. Comment, let me know what kind of stuff you want to see. Do you want to see some of my other story concepts? Do you want to hear more about Trace in particular, or the prequel with the other characters that I have? Just let me know, because I think it would be really, really interesting to do, and I think that the creative people among my audience would like that. But anyway, thank you guys so much for watching. Thank you so much to my patrons, Inside Chaos, Salmon, and Creativa Artly. Thank you guys so much. Your support means so much, and everybody watching means so much. And I hope you guys have a wonderful, wonderful day. And I will see you guys next time. Bye!